Scotland, there's this little bookshop up there that has really old books, I think dating back to the 1900s, 1800s, that have still survived. And I got this book that's called Astrological Aspects, and it teaches you some basics of astrology. I think, let's see when this was written. This was written in well, this person was born in 1887, so around that time. What was it here? First printed in 1930, so it's from the 30s. It's really cool. And I love the way that it's got it engraved here. Yes, one of my passions is astrology. So I want to do a little bit of teaching astrology. And because this book was written so long ago, a lot of things might not correlate to today. So for example, like a lot of the times when they would mention, I'm trying to think of a specific example, like a lot of the worries back then was more about health. So like if you got a disease, you might end up passing away from it because there wasn't a cure back then. So a lot of things are still outdated because we've also evolved with the times, so now they mean different things. So there's a little disclaimer. But today I want to walk you through what the sun sign means and what the moon sign means. Because if you're quite new to astrology, you might think astrology is just horoscopes, but it's not. That's just like a media way of getting all the information about astrology. So we like condense it down to horoscopes, but that's not necessarily what astrology is. Astrology is the study of the stars. And it's been going for thousands of years, studying stars. We've done it since the beginning of time, really. Let's get into the right page. Yes, so astrology isn't just horoscopes, because I think it can get misinterpreted, which is where a lot of doubt comes from it, and people don't believe it, and so on and so forth. But I want to teach you a little bit and also show you the different things and what they mean, because now it's also becoming mainstream again. So a lot of information is given to us and we don't really know what that means, unless you actively study astrology or you want to learn about it, or you just like going and doing a deep dive. Although astronomically so different, the sun and the moon, sun signs are your star signs. Moon signs will be different for the most part to your sun sign, but it can also be the same, and that also means different things. These bodies must be considered side by side for the purpose of astrological study. They constitute a pair or dyad, which may be viewed from many aspects. They are male and female, active and passive, present and past, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, objective and subjective. Every human psyche contains a male and female aspect, as is recognised by modern science. Again, this might be a little bit outdated, but back then, this is how it was viewed. Upon the natal configuration of the sun and the moon mainly depends the relation between these two basic sides of the personality and their reciprocal functioning, whether normal or abnormal. The sun represents action, outgoing, positive, aggressive, self-assertive, self-expressive principle. It is not so much character made as character in the making. It symbolises the life lying before the newborn babe. On the other hand, the moon is the past and what has and holds from the past. Habits, hereditary, prejudice, family, all of that. It is the indraw, private, negative, self-protective, assimilative portion. Thus it dominates the past, and the sun is tempered by the moon from the very beginning. But as regards the future, the moon is itself dominated by the sun, for it can imbibe and assimilate only what the sun wins for it. Harmoniously related, these bodies indicate good health, supported by a strong constitution, a fortune future growing out of an ordinate past, concord between the private life and the professional, and an absence of inner conflicts. Inharmonious aspects include to throw the life into two portions, antagonistic or at least disjointed. This dissonance will pervade the entire being, the outer reflecting the inner. But it may be repeated that the sun must be considered above all else in judging the active life. When you're reading a birth chart, that's what this means. Its aspects indicate the measure of success that will be attained in what direction, and with what facility or tribulation. They represent the work to be done, due attention being paid to the sign, house, and aspects involved. The moon is more important in relation to ordinary character, and is particularly so in early life before the sun's influence makes itself felt. A child with moon and square to Mars. Moon square Mars is an astrological aspect. If you know about astrology, this will make sense. If you don't, it's like speaking gibberish. But just bear with me. But the sun in trine to Saturn will be hot-tempered or impulsive, but will become, as the years pass, prudent, controlled, or at least in action. Habits, morals, and temperament are all shown to a large extent by the moon and what sign it falls under. The ascendant being even less self-conscious and rising little above the sensations and instincts. Important though, these are in their own spheres. The mutual aspects are of a general and diffuse character rather than particular and focused. The particularization lies with the planets. Hence their effects are not always easily traced unless life and character can be viewed in perspective. It is thought by many that even bad aspects are to be preferred to none at all, since an entire lack of relationship between the lights tend to prevent the coordination of life, with the result that there is often an absence of defined interest and pursuits, and a possible tendency to drift. It is certain that inharmonious aspects are by no means always disastrous, and they may even indicate a high pitch of intelligence and psychic ability. Considered from the solar part of the combination, the aspects affect the success and repute of the native, these being influenced by the moon through those of which it is a general significatrix, which are the parents, wife, family, home, the common people. Considered from the lunar side, these last mentioned matters are affected through things denoted by the sun, which are persons in power and authority, nobility, royalty, and Leo people in general. The lights are significators of the parents, but the usual rule that the sun is the father and the moon is the mother seems not to be rigidly applicable. Moreover, it is not exclusive true that the sun is the husband in a woman's map, and the moon the wife in a man's. It is often obvious that the lunar aspects affect a woman through a father and a husband, and that solar aspects affect a man through wife and mother. We are told, for example, that Charles Dickens moulded the character of Micawber on his father. Now Micawber is much more remnants of his moon conjunct Neptune in Sagittarius than it is with the author's sun in Aquarius squared by Uranus, a rather violent intellectual type, by no means, resembling the convivial and prolific Micawber. The sun may indeed indicate the father, and in particular the active side of his family, and is specifically so when his activities intimately affect the native. For example, if they're engaged in the same business, but in general sense of our hereditary, whether from father or mother, is chiefly shown by the moon. For example, King George V had the sun in Gemini, which does not describe his father, who had nothing in that sign, nor the grandfather, who had only Mars therein, but it is clearly derived from Queen Victoria, who had both the lights and the ascendant in that sign. So a little backstory as to what the sun and the moon means in astrology. The sun is your star sign. It's when you're born, the star sign that falls under that month, that's your sun sign. For me, I'm a Gemini. I was born in June when the sun was in Gemini, so that makes me a Gemini. That's how you find out your sun sign. With your moon sign, you find it out by going online, doing a little birth chart. You have to, with your moon sign, you don't need to know the time that you were born. but to find your rising you do. But the moon, every day or every 2-3 days is in a different sign, so it changes signs quite frequently. The nature of the moon as well is something that is always changing. Like the moon in itself, it has many different phases and it will change a lot throughout the month. So moon tends to represent your feelings, your inner thoughts, the way that you deal with things in a feeling way, in an emotional way. And it can change a lot because, again, the moon is interchangeable. And how you find your moon sign is by going to like an astrological website and then finding out what your moon sign is. For example, mine is Leo. So my emotions, even though I'm quite intellectual in the way that I think and the way that I navigate the world, because I've got Gemini in me, and Geminis are all about thinking things through. We can be a little bit in the air, as in like we're here one day, we're there another. We have a lot of ideas, so it's hard for us to settle down on one thing. What else? We also like to collect information. Geminis are all about information. We give out information like I'm doing right now. Or we take in a lot of information and we know a lot about everything. Not in depth, but we just know a little bit about everything. But then my moon is in Leo. Moon in Leos, individuals can be very nurturing. They need to be nurtured, but they also nurture others. They do need to be shown off a little bit, especially by their family, by friends, by people that they're with, their loved ones, because if that doesn't happen, I don't know if you know the stereotypes of Leos. If Leos don't have attention, they will do things to get attention. But it's not just about that. When it comes to a Leo, they need that approval. Sometimes Leos seek out approval from others and feeling like they belong, and that those themes will fit into my moon sign because I have moon in Leo, and Gemini and Leos, they work well together, but it's two different energies going on. In a birth chart, you have things called aspects, which is how each planet is kind of talking to each other. Are they like in agreement with each other, or do they hate each other, or do they like love and hate each other? That's a way that I like to look at it. For example, a square, which I mentioned earlier, it's like two planets that don't really see eye to eye, but they get things done, but they don't really see eye to eye. If it's trine, which we mentioned earlier, trine is good. Trine, it's harmonious. They talk to each other. These planets are in coercion with each other. They help each other out, and it's kind of like an easy marriage. Things aren't going too bad, too crazy. I'm going to read a little bit more on the harmonious aspects and what that means. Harmonious aspects between the sun and the moon. These are conducive to happiness and tranquility. They make for popularity with the world at large. They do not make for a very vigorous or ambitious life in a public sense, but they may be a considerable success without much open or struggle to conflict. An exception to this is Lord Beaconsfield, whose Martian ascendant, meaning that his rising sign would have been either in Aries or Scorpio, because they both are ruled by Mars, gave him the grit and courage that sign trine moon would have denied. However, it is noteworthy that he also sought success as an author. The Duke of Windsor, who certainly does not avoid dangers, has the sun squared by Mars. Otherwise, the trine seeks ways of peace and quietude. It is an influence which points to a comfortable home and a much mutual understanding when native and marriage partners. Where this is otherwise, aspects to the lights and to Venus. When we say the lights, it's also called luminaries. Sun and moon are luminaries because they're not a planet. They're a source of light, a form of light. The sun is a star, the moon is a luminary. That's what they mean by the lights. And to Venus must of course be considered together with the 7th house. In the same way, it is likely to denote a happy life with the parents. It is an influence that signifies a general harmony in the nature, settled and congenial interests, and an absence of the inner conflicts that occur with the inharmonious contacts. The inherited disposition, training and upbringing are not hostile to the pursuits and interests that are taken up voluntarily as the life develops. The adult life tends to grow naturally out of the early years. There is not likely to be a violent breaking away from home conditions, or if there is something of the sort, readjustment ensues speedily and readily. Many of the benefits of these aspects are subconscious and ingrained, and they are therefore not always obvious, especially to the native himself. Any kind of contact causes the native's life to be intimately connected with that of his family, or sometimes with his partner's family, through the relations may be psychological rather than material. Sometimes there is a distinctively patriotic aspect to the contacts, and the native is particularly politically minded. Again, they incline to domestic and landed interests and are excellent for all pursuits that are connected with house property or with appliances that are of a domestic character. Sometimes the vocation is carried out at home or in homes, as for example is the often case with a physician. Often the partner either helps the native directly or shares his interests. So if you were to look on your birth chart and if you were to see how the sun and the moon are talking to each other, you would see whether it's a square that comes up, a triangle, which is a trine, one that's a little star, which is called sextile, a conjunction, which is when the sun sits on top of the moon, so they're like this together, or an opposition, which literally means they're opposite each other. And then you would come to this book and you would read about whether it's a harmonious aspect and what this could mean for you, or an inharmonious aspect, which is the opposite, and what that means for you, or if it's a conjunction, so if they're sitting on top of each other, as in if you have the same, if you're like your sun is in Aries and your moon is in Aries, what that could mean. The conjunction, which is what it means when they're sat together. This is sometimes regarded with disfavour, it being stated that it tends to weakness of body and of no very bright-minded condition of mind. It is of course a critical position, since the two most important bodies of the horoscope are placed together, usually in the same sign within the same aspects. It can scarcely itself tend to breadth of outlook or adaptability, for the interests will naturally incline to help to centre on the matters of the house that is occupied, and the character will be heavily marked with the sign in which the lights are in. What this means is, so if you have your sun in Aries and your moon in Aries, and then you look at your birth chart, which is like a little pie chart, and it falls into the house of 2 or number 2, that interpretation will be different than if you have sun in Aries, moon in Aries, but that conjunction, which is when they sit on top of each other, falls in house number 10. So what each house your sun and your moon is at as well in your birth chart is really important, because it shows aspects of where you shine. They're the lights, the luminaries, where you shine, where you're comfortable in, where people see your drive, but also matters of your emotions, and or maybe where your emotions can be heightened, because moon's emotions and which aspect or area of life can be heightened depending on which house it falls into. Then I'm going to read you the inharmonious aspects here, which is when it's a square, opposition, and I think that's it. I don't think I've missed anything else. I believe I haven't. So these contacts appear. Oh wait, no. I'm going to continue reading the conjunction because I skipped. So, it often happens that Mercury and Venus are also one or both in the same sign and house, and the tendency to unbalance is then considerable. Some extremes must therefore be expected. In fire, the emotional nature will be active. So if you have Sun in Aries, Moon in Aries, emotional nature will be active. In a water sign, the feelings and susceptibilities will be strong. In air signs, there may be mental coldness or fickle and caprice. In earth, heaviness and stagnation. Yet these dangers are by no means inevitable. It may be surmised that this conjunction does not tend to make the native in some way a whole hogger, or one whose eggs are in one basket, whether they're material, emotional, or mental X. It is likely that they will be part emotional in any case, and some degree of self-will and stubbornness is probable. For the pleianthy of the moon is stiffened by the sun. It inclines a little to vanity and self-opinionation. Sometimes there is a considerable repression and a tendency to live to oneself in mental or actual isolation. Inharmonious aspects. So this is when the planets are not in agreement with each other. These contacts appear to have no very ill effect on the character, except that it is perhaps a tendency to self-will and imperiousness, this being also sometimes observable in the good aspects. But a profound, though not always an acute, conflict is indicated in the psychology, there being often a distinct cleavage in the life, so that one side of the nature is divorced from the other. The professional work may be distasteful and may conflict with the real interests of the native. On the other hand, the domestic life may not be tranquil, and the two are often in some kind of antagonism. The same division may occur between the two parents or between the father and his work, because, as we said earlier in the book, traditionally sun is the father, moon is the mother, but it doesn't mean it's your father or your mother. That's just what its role. It's the feminine and the masculine energy that they represent. Where was I? It is a position of incompatibility, both inner and outer, and the inner strife may be reflected in brusque and rude manners, or in an uncertain and changeful demeanour. It makes for unpopularity, or sometimes for alterations of favour and disfavour, and the native may be much liked by some and much assailed by others, in the latter case, often by Leo persons and those in authority. Men with this configuration are often disliked by women, and women with it disliked by men, though regarded must also be paid to Venus and Mars in this connection. It is often sensitive and emotional, and as a consequence may live an indrawn life, shrinking from rough experiences. On the other hand, in a vigorous map, it may lead to a battle. It seems to take nothing from the mental powers, which are often considerable, especially in the case of the opposition, but their exercise often leads to quarrels and estrangements. The native stands alone, or at least at variance with the common stock. And then he gives little examples of people who have sun and moon in harmonious conjunction or inharmonious aspects. As I said, some of these things are a little bit outdated because of the world we live in. Things have evolved, and some of these worries won't be what we worry about now. This is just a little taster of astrology and how much there actually is to learn about astrology, and it's just not one thing. It's not just you're a Gemini so you behave in a certain way. There's a lot that goes into it, and when or if you ever decide to look at your chart and you want to get a chart reading or try to learn how to read your own chart, astrology books are really, really helpful. And there's also a lot to decode. You're kind of decoding the birth chart and figuring out what this could mean and how this can show up in your life. Yes. But let me know if you liked this logical aspect.